Whoa, 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 what's going on here? This isn't a video about music, this is the video about sound. So let's talk about sound. Music is commonplace in pretty much every movie today. Typically it's used for emotion and to help pace the story, but what about sound? You don't really get much of any focus on sound in movies, and so when a movie does use sound well, it catches your attention. And you realize that sound design actually plays a really similar role to music. It can establish the rhythm of a scene, it can build the tension of a scene, and it can be used for emotion too.
Kill him! Kill him!
But despite cinema being a medium of sight and sound, you rarely see that second half of it get used with strong intention like this. Instead of using what's organic to film, the driving sound design for most movies is just this: music. So what changes when a movie disregards common practice, ditches the music, and embraces its natural sound? I'm sorry, the music makes it easier to pace these videos. No Country for Old Men, directed by Joel and Ethan Coen, has pretty much no music. There are a couple scenes where it has some very subtle music.
Everything. How's that?
Just tend to win everything, call it.
But for the most part, the movie relies on its images and its sound. And a lot of the time it does this in place of music.
The majority of the music is really sound design, ambient sound design, inhales and what you do with your fingers, how you stand, how you grunt.
Throughout all of No Country for Old Men, this is what you get. Instead of something pronounced like a score, you get something subtle, like the sound of some bikes. Or of a tracker. Or even horse hooves.
Getting set to trade, then whoa, difference isn't.
Similar to what music does, these sounds create a feeling of rhythm.
These boys appear to be managerial.
And this rhythm can be used to pace and highlight certain parts of the movie. For example, here you don't even really notice the horse hooves until they've stopped. And that contrast of sound highlights the sheriff's words.
If it ain't, it'll do till the mess gets here.
Through so much of the movie, this is our emotional guide, this contrast, this symphony of sound. Take for example the scene where the cartel tries to hunt down our protagonist. Instead of a typical Hollywood action score, the scene builds its excitement by what's happening in it, like the oppressive sound of a vehicle. Or his panicked breathing. And just like a good score, all of these sounds build upon each other as a crescendo. Until at the end of the scene you get its final climax. Where all of this excitement is immediately contrasted by the calming water. And what highlights and enhances all of this is the fact that the initial feeling of fear in this scene starts in almost complete silence. And as the threat grows, so does the noise.
What Carter was saying about No Country for Old Men is a perfect example. Basically, that movie was an attempt to make a very, very scary movie with as few sounds as possible and still have it be a very interesting sounding movie.
In fact, almost all of the sound No Country for Old Men uses is predicated around this use of silence. Because just like bright and dark, and just like colorful and dull, a lot of what you get from sound comes from what you contrast it with. And so when a scene has nothing but silence, the sound that does come feels extremely pronounced. In fact, this whole scene is a masterclass around the use of silence to enhance certain sounds. Like a gunshot, or footsteps. And I would argue that this use of sound creates more tension than any music could. Of course, silence is talked about a lot in movies, but No Country for Old Men is unique because of this fact that it uses it in place of music in almost every scene.
Let's go to your room.
For example, what does this scene feel like if I include a score?
You're good.
Make it worth your while. Take you to an ATM, there's 14 grand in it. Everybody just walks away.
An ATM.
I think on first viewing, it's a much more visceral experience. So what happens if I take away the music?
Take you to an ATM, There's 14 grand in it. And everybody just walks away.
An ATM.
At first glance, it feels like this scene suffers from its absence, like it's not quite as powerful as it otherwise could be. But what happens when you eliminate the music to focus on the sound is that the movie becomes more immersive, because you start to hear what the characters hear. At times, the Coen brothers deliberately enhance the noise of something to add to its effect, things like the sound of broken glass, or the sound of a rapper.
What's the most you ever lost on a coin toss?
And so instead of music to enhance the emotion, you get a noise. And this has the added benefit of putting you in the headspace of a character.
I can find it from the riverbank. I know where it is.
For a man who's waiting to hear the sound of a gunshot, the sound of his death, how visceral would a noise sound?
You could have the money, Anton.
And so we hear what he hears. And so we sort of feel what he feels. Still, you could argue that maybe there are a couple moments in the movie where the Coen brothers are too focused on the important sounds.
They rent out rooms to old people, kill them, bury them in the yard, cash their social security checks.
Like in a conversation, they want to emphasize the dialogue because that's what's important to the scene. But then you also realize they're in a diner and there's almost no background noise.
There's a question, whether they stop being, and when.
It feels sort of strange. David Lynch uses the same technique in Mulholland Drive, but here it's used with intention.
I had a dream about this place.
Oh boy.
Because it fits the dreamlike quality of what's going on. But for most of No Country for Old Men, its emphasis on certain sounds is incredibly effective at putting the audience in a trance where you start to respond emotionally to a noise and its association with something. Like a psychopath's eerily consistent footsteps. And after a while, this sound starts to trigger a response from the audience, because we know what it means. Impending doom. You can see a more highlighted use of this in other movies. For example, in 1979's Stalker, each of these characters are on their way to a destination, wanting to fulfill or redeem a certain part of their lives. In short, they're traveling to find hope. But then before they arrive at their destination, they're forced to send the trolley back and wander through the unknown on foot. And so we get that same sound of hope and wonder, leaving them. This idea of associating a sound with something is actually a part of what movies are built on. You associate a character with what they've gone through, you associate a location with what's transpired there, and you associate an image for what you know about it and what's changed. Sound can be used the same way, and the great thing about prioritizing sound over music is that these associations often create themselves. And that's why I think No Country for Old Men is one of the most unique movies ever made in American cinema. Because the movie simultaneously has no soundtrack and one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard.
I got it under control.
Just having the raw sound lead and orchestrate the whole movie makes everything feel, I don't know, very tangible. And it all comes with the benefit of allowing us to hear and experience what the characters do. And that's why rewatching this movie is always a treat, because it reminds me that for a medium composed of sight and sound, it's important not to neglect that aspect that's often overlooked.
Hello?
Yes.
Thanks for watching.